The Azir Irelia discussion is more than just about Azir Irelia. Dovagetes did a whole post on the stats and whatnot in Reddit, which will be in the link in the description. So I would definitely urge you to check that out because I'm not going to reference any of that because I'm talking higher concept than specifically about Azir Irelia because it's whether that deck specifically needs to be changed or not, and a lot of the discussions that are going from the pro side and Reddit and Twitter and all that, it all kind of has to do somewhat specifically with Azir Irelia, but also not. It's more than that, right? So Azir Irelia on ladder right now, definitely a great deck. I mean, as evidenced by the 2 hours or so or whatever that I've been playing, hour and a half that I've been playing, I've gone up a whole rank in plat. Not worth a ton, but it's still, top whatever percent of players. And I hit master every season. I'm not an amazing player, but I'm not like I'm a consistently master player. So take that for what it's worth. This isn't talking about high level master, but it is talking about consistently master. The deck is definitely in a good spot, in the same way that Twisted Fate Fizz was in a good spot, in the same way that TLC at points has been in a good spot, in the same way that NASA's Thresh has been in a good spot, in the same way that I can keep going on if you want me to, but I won't. There are decks that are good and have high win rates and do well against X number of decks in the format. Is Azir Irelia unbeatable? No, absolutely not. There are plenty of decks that have favored matchups. Again, I think that there's the Reddit post that has more of the matchup table, so maybe I'm speaking a little bit out of turn, but regardless, it certainly does not beat every single deck and is not unbeatable. Is it strong? Yes. Does it keep certain decks? Does it prevent certain decks from being good? Yes. Does it keep certain decks from being playable? Yes. Does it quell some of the brewing and I can't play my my mono 7-drop Malphite deck because if I'll lose on turn 5 to the I'll lose on turn 4 or 5 to the Azir Irelia Goldfish draw? Absolutely yes. Runeterra, and especially competitive Runeterra, is not EDH in Magic, and I'm gonna throw around Magic terms with I'm going to throw them around willy-nilly, so sorry. But it is not EDH where everyone, comes and brings their favorite pet deck and everyone has a chance and has and gets to, slam their haymakers. Certain decks are always going to be culled from the bottom, and I think Azir Irelia is kind of a perfect mix of decks that is, so it's strong. Obviously the win rates sort of speak for themselves. It's got a very powerful effect. It is, very synergistic, and when the synergies line up, it actually amplifies the power even more. Something like Twisted Fate Fizz, there were minor synergies, right? Obviously, Twisted Fate and pick a card was a synergy. Twisted Fate plus drawing cards is a synergy, but it's like a minor synergy and then gives you a powerful effect. The synergies in this deck really, really amplify themselves. Getting multiple attacks with Azir really helps. Also, putting multiple units in play amplifies Azir, which is great. It amplifies Irelia. It amplifies Deus. All those things, and it's like a multiplying effect. It's not just like, oh, you're adding a couple of damage. It's like you're adding a ton of damage, especially if you have a student in play or a Greenglade duo in play. All of those things are like multiplicative, not just additive. So it really, when the deck runs and has the nut draws, it feels like nothing was possible. I couldn't win, and I died super quickly, and people remember that, and it feels bad. On the flip side, something like TLC doesn't have as many inherent strategies. It's a control deck. A control deck is never going to feel like that. TLC does have some inherent synergies to it, like fading memories on the ice pillar and playing 4 ice pillars and winning all in one turn, right? There's synergies there, but there's not like 4 different synergies that all also cross synergize with each other and they're multiplicative, right? And TLC doesn't win on turn 5 either, right? There's always a back and forth. There's a pass. You always kind of feel like you have an out, like you played somewhat of a game against TLC. Whereas I think if you talk to high level players, they would say, and players who have played a lot, who know the decks and know the matchups like masterfully. I'm talking about someone much higher ranked than me, that plays tons of games, is a pro tournament winner, that type of, and is grinding matchups, right? Where, if a certain stage of the game, there could be nothing in play, right? It's turn 6 against TLC. You're playing, I don't know, Thresh Nasus or something. I'm making this up for example. It might not actually be true, but follow me. It may be turn 6. There can be nothing in play, and you don't know your opponent's hand, but the game is over, right? But it doesn't feel over. Azir Irelia, that's not really possible because it needs its things in play, and it needs to have done damage to you to end the game. And it needs to, or to have done damage to you to end the game. It needs to do one of those two things, and those are very visible and very evident, in the way that a TLC deck doesn't necessarily have to do that. It kind of goes back and forth, plays control, wipes the board a little bit, and then, over the course of 2 or 3 turns, it wins the game instantly, right? And that sort of bad feeling, the feeling of you're going to die, the feeling of, oh, I'm dead, is close to the same amount of physical time between Azir Irelia and TLC, where it's like, oh, Watcher came down, I guess I'm dead. Or like, oh, they have the Trundle, they have 2 Ice Pillars in hand, they're likely going to kill me next turn, in the same way that, oh, there's an Azir, it's a leveled Azir, they have a Deus in play, they have a Green Glade duo, next turn I'm going to lose. The actual number of turns is the same amount of time where I think, oh crap, I'm dead or I'm going to lose. But the key difference is that even though it's the same number of turns, it's not the same percentage of turns, where 2 turns of thinking that you're going to lose is perhaps half of an Azir Irelia game, or a third of an Azir Irelia game. It's like a 1/6 or an 1/8 of a TLC game. So mentally, it feels different, even though it's actually the same number of turns. There's more game that's been played, and but there's more game that's been played before those turns in a TLC matchup than in a Azir Irelia matchup. But it's still the same number of turns, and it's possibly the same power level. They might have different win rates depending on the meta, but my point stands that they are doing the same thing. The only thing that's different is the optics and how it feels for the person playing against it. Now, that's not to discount that feeling is important, because if every single game, we're not logic-based robots that are like, oh, all I care about is win rate. If I have 50.0001 win rate, I am happy. That's not it. That feeling and the knowing how you feel after a game, win or lose, is important, because we need people to play the game. We need people to want to play the game and have fun playing the game. Fun is definitely a factor, but it's not the only factor. And win rates and whatnot are also not the only factor. And the point I'm trying to make is that some of that is concrete and some of it is hard, like data driven. And, people like Cosmic do a really good job of analyzing the meta, although that goes into another conversation of like, how much of the meta is actually like, how much of a vicious cycle or self-fulfilling prophecy is this, where like, oh, I see that Azir Irelia is the best deck, therefore I play it, therefore its play rates go way up and it's overrepresented. That's a different conversation. I'm not even going to get into that. But it's tough. The point I'm trying to make is that it is tough for especially the game devs to balance all of that. Not even just balance the cards so that they are balanced in the game sense. I mean, balance how much do you balance around fun versus how much do you do win rates, and like the community. My Duality of Man tweets are meant mostly for comedy, but they also literally are like, there are two people in the community whom I, for the most part, usually respect their opinions, but they have the opposite opinion, right? It's like someone says like, oh, this meta is the worst meta we've ever had, and the other person saying this is the most fun I've ever had, the duality of man. The fact that those tweets exist and that can happen just goes to show the complexities of the game. And I think, you know, I had a conversation. I've talked about it on the podcast, but I'm not going to mention it here because I don't know if they necessarily want to be accredited for this. But I talked with someone who was a pro in a different TCG, and I asked them about their experience in Runeterra, and they said they love Runeterra because it's like the Wild West of the game that they used to play, where nothing is actually solved, nothing's figured out, nothing is optimized, and there's so much exploration that can be done that just isn't, because we get in this sort of blinders mode of, oh, Azir Irelia is broken. Instead of trying to beat it, or instead of trying to figure out a new deck or try a new champion or play something else, let's try to get Azir Irelia nerfed, because that is the objective, because streamer says this, because content creator says this, because I lost to the deck. And there's much less of the let's try something else, or let's try to beat it, or let's try that. And there's a whole bevy of factors as to why that is, but that is the case. And the point I'm trying to make is that it's much more nuanced and it's harder to do than that. And I don't think that the issue is Azir Irelia specifically, just like it wasn't TF Fizz specifically. Maybe it was. That deck was kind of broken. Just like it wasn't Heimer specifically back in the day. Just like it wasn't this, that, and just like it's not going to be the same thing in a, you know, the next meta, right? So the long and short of it is, you know, try to have fun with it. If you hate Azir Irelia, maybe, I don't know, play a different deck, play a deck that beats it, play Mono Fiora, you know, try something else, or play it yourself. I think I've been having fun with it, but I think that there's just, people are not putting in the work to try to combat these things, and maybe it's not their job to do that, but at the end of the day, you know, if you're not having fun playing the game, then, you know, I mean, you don't have to play it. I'd love to have you play it, and I absolutely want as many people to play LOR as possible, but if you're not having fun playing the game, I'm not holding the gun to your head. You don't have to play. And I think that there's things that we can internally do for ourselves, but as well as a community we can do to try to do, you know, to try to combat those things, instead of just saying, oh, devs nerf this card, and I'm going to cry if it doesn't get nerfed. So that's my thesis. Hey, you made it to the end of the video. Thanks for that. Do us a favor, leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Also, if you want notifications, go ahead and ring the fucking bell.